I spent the last few days trying to convince myself that what happened on Christmas Eve was just a dream. A harmless trick of the mind. Something caused by exhaustion, by the storm, by that particular kind of loneliness that settles into your bones this time of year. But if it was only in my head, then why did the snow look different the next morning? I remember standing at the window, staring at those long, straight grooves carved across the frozen ground. Too deep, too clean, too deliberate to be made by a person. It looked as if something had been dragged beneath the ice. I stared as long as I could bear, because the longer I watched, the more the snow seemed to shift, to move, very slightly, like it was breathing. I stepped back, closed the curtains, told myself I just needed coffee, something warm to hold on to, something to anchor my shaking hands. But when I finally returned to the window an hour later, the grooves were gone, not covered by fresh snowfall, not melted by the weak morning sun, just gone, as if the ground had pulled them back in and smoothed over its own skin. That was the first sign. The second came around noon, when my old radio, the one my father left me, clicked on by itself. I hadn't touched it, I hadn't used it in months. There was no station signal, no music, not even static, just a faint tapping. 3 slow knocks, knock, 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 a pause, then 3 more. I turned the volume down, the tapping grew louder. I unplugged the radio, it kept going. The sound didn't stop, it simply moved. It seemed to drift into the walls around me, as if the house itself had begun knocking. By evening, the wind rose. Not strong, not angry, just intentional. The kind of wind that isn't bringing weather, but searching for an entrance. The temperature dropped so suddenly that frost crawled up the inside of the windows. I could see my breath even standing next to the fire. And that's when I knew I couldn't stay in the house that night. Not after what happened in the Hendersons' home. Not after what I heard behind their tree. And not after what took the sheriff. I didn't want to be alone if whatever did that came back. So I layered myself against the cold and stepped outside into the kind of chill that feels like hands pressing into your ribs. Main Street was empty. Lights glowed behind curtains. Shadows moved through warm living rooms. Fireplaces crackled faintly, but no one was outside. Not a single voice, not a single car. It was Christmas Eve all over again, except this time everyone had locked their doors. Everyone except the church. The double doors stood slightly open, just enough for the wind to slip inside and moan through the empty hall. I didn't want to go in, but something about that small opening felt deliberate, as if someone wanted me to see it. I stepped inside. The hinges screamed softly behind me as the door shifted. Warm air fled the moment I entered, replaced by a thick, heavy stillness. And then I heard it. Not a whisper, not a bell, a voice, low, tired, unmistakably familiar. It said my name, from somewhere near the altar. I froze. For a long moment, I didn't breathe. The voice was so soft, so weary, it almost sounded human. Almost. I moved toward the voice. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if something thick were clinging to my legs, dragging at me. Every instinct begged me to turn around, to leave the church and run back into the cold. But I couldn't. I needed to know. I needed to see who or what had spoken. The closer I came to the altar, the colder the air became. My breath fogged in front of me in long, trembling clouds. I turned the corner, and all the lights in the church blazed on at once. White, blinding, silent. The space was empty, completely empty. But the moment the light came on, I felt someone standing behind me. I didn't turn, couldn't turn. The back of my neck prickled so violently, it was almost painful, like static had crawled up my spine and was holding me still. My eyes fixed on the wall ahead. I thought, maybe if I don't move, it won't either. Then the voice came again, this time directly beside my ear. You shouldn't have followed the footprints. A cold breath brushed the side of my neck. I spun so fast I nearly fell, knocking over a stand of unlit candles. They hit the floor and scattered, their echoes clattering across the pews, but no one was there. Just shadows stretching in the corners where the light couldn't reach. I backed away, keeping my eyes locked on those shadows. But nothing stepped out. Nothing moved. The church was empty, or pretending to be. I didn't walk out, I ran. Out the doors, down the silent street, past houses glowing warm behind closed curtains. My footsteps were the only sound in the entire town. I didn't stop until I reached the old bridge at the edge of town. The river below was nothing but a frozen sheet, a pale, breathless expanse disappearing into the tree line. For a moment, everything seemed still, calm, almost peaceful. Then the ice cracked. A single violent crack that echoed up the valley like a gunshot. I staggered back, staring as a black line split the ice perfectly in two. Not jagged, not natural. Straight, deliberate. Something pushed upward from beneath. The snow on the river's surface began to rise, slowly, smoothly, forming a long mound. Like something enormous was gliding under the ice, coming toward me, picking up speed. I didn't wait to see it break free. I ran so hard my lungs burned with every breath. I didn't look back, not once. By the time I reached home, the wind had stopped. The air was still. The world was silent. Too silent. My front door was cracked open. A sliver of warm light spilled onto the snow. My stomach twisted. My legs felt heavy, almost numb. I stepped toward the doorway cautiously, bracing for the cold. But the house wasn't cold. It was warm, comfortably warm, unnaturally warm. The fire crackled in the hearth. My coffee mug sat on the table, steam curling gently from the rim. My coat hung neatly on the rack. Everything looked exactly the way I had left it, except for one thing. Wet footprints covered the floor, large ones, much larger than mine, leading from the front door across the living room and stopping abruptly in the center of the floor, as if whoever made them had simply stopped existing. The water around them wasn't melting normally. It hissed faintly, steaming, evaporating in slow, deliberate curls. At the end of the final footprint was a small piece of folded paper, the same kind of paper I'd seen in the cabin. With shaking hands, I opened it. 3 words, written in the same jagged, trembling script. I'm inside now. The house went quiet. The fire cracked once, then all the lights went out. And I walked toward the voice. One careful step, then another. The church felt colder with every move I made. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, but the kind that sinks straight into your bones, freezing something deeper than flesh. The voice called my name again, softer this time, almost tender. And that tenderness, that was what terrified me most. As I reached the front pew, the air shifted, a pressure like the room itself was inhaling. I could hear the wooden beams above me creak, as if reacting to something enormous I could not see. I know you're here. My voice cracked on the last word. I hated that. I sounded like a child calling out into a dark hallway. Then the candles near the altar flickered, all at once. Not from wind. There was no wind. It looked like something was moving between them, blocking the light with a shape I couldn't quite focus on. I felt it before I heard it. A presence behind me. I didn't turn. My body refused to let me. My muscles locked, as though held in place by invisible hands. And then it whispered. Not my name, not words, just a sound, wet and strained, like breath forced through a throat that hadn't felt air in a very long time. I clenched my teeth so hard, my jaw popped. Something in that whisper pushed at my mind. A pressure, like fingers trying to pry open a door I was holding shut. And suddenly the pressure stopped. The air warmed by a single degree, enough for me to take a breath, enough to break whatever held me. I spun around, too fast, stumbling on the wooden step. My hand grabbed the nearest pew, steadying myself. But there was nothing behind me. Nothing standing in the aisle, nothing moving between the shadows. Just empty rows and that deep, impossible silence. I should have left. Anyone with sense would have. But something caught my eye. A shape on the altar. A book. Old, thick, its leather cracked like dried skin. It hadn't been there before. Or maybe I was wrong. Maybe it had been, and I simply hadn't noticed. I stepped closer, my heartbeat thudding against my ribs in uneven bursts. The book was open to a page filled with symbols, not letters, not language, but something older, etched as if with a burnt stick. jagged, violent. My breath fogged the air as I leaned in. And then the symbols moved. They shifted across the page, crawling like black insects, rearranging themselves, forming something I could almost read. My name, written in a language that wasn't a language, but somehow I'd understood it anyway. My knees weakened. I dug my fingers into the altar to stay upright. Who are you? The words escaped before I could stop them. The candles flared. A low hum filled the room, not heard through the ears, but through the chest, like a second heartbeat. And then, from somewhere behind the altar, from the darkest shadow in the church, something answered. I'm close. The voice was not human, but it tried to be. Each word scraped across my mind. Too slow, too careful, as if the speaker was learning how to shape them. I backed away, step after step, my eyes locked on the altar. The hum grew louder. The book's pages fluttered violently, as though a storm was blowing inside it. I turned, finally, and ran down the aisle. My footsteps echoed like gunshots. The front doors slammed shut on their own, forcing me to shove them with my full weight before they burst open. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and sharp. I didn't stop running, not until the church was a fading shape behind me and the only sound was my ragged breathing. But even then, I still heard the voice, soft, trailing behind me like a second shadow. I'm close. Slow, breathless. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The voice stayed with me long after I left the church. Not outside, not in the air around me, but somewhere deeper. Like it had settled behind my heartbeat, waiting for the right moment to speak again. I locked every door, every window, dragged a chair under the handle even though I knew a wooden chair wasn't going to stop whatever that was. But fear makes you do stupid human things. Things that make you feel protected even when you aren't. The house creaked in ways it never had before. The pipes groaned. The glass rattled as though touched by fingers on the other side. And then, soft strained, the radio turned on again. No static, no stations, just that same hollow thumping sound. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, pause, then 3 more. Except this time, it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from inside the walls. Pause 2 seconds. I stepped closer, pressing my ear to the wallpaper. The knocks grew clearer, more deliberate, as though something was methodically searching its way through the house, tapping along the beams, trying to understand the shape of the structure, or the shape of me. Then the knocking stopped. Silence filled the room so completely, so unnaturally, that it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Very quiet, and then a whisper. Not a voice this time, more like a breath, exhaled through a narrow crack in the wall. It skimmed across my neck, cold as the snow outside. Shaken, I stumbled back, tripped over the chair I'd placed by the door. My heart slammed against my ribs in an unsteady rhythm. I grabbed my coat, my boots, anything I could reach, and I left. Didn't even turn off the lights. I just ran into the street, letting the night swallow me whole. The town was still empty. Windows glowed warmly, but not a single person walked outside. Not even footsteps in the fresh snow. Every house looked lived in, but every street looked abandoned. And the longer I walked, the more wrong it all felt. Slowly. The air didn't move, not even a breeze. Snowflakes hung suspended, falling so slowly they looked frozen in place. The whole town felt paused. Then far ahead, a light flickered. Not a house, not a car, a lamppost. It blinked once, twice, and I saw something standing beneath it. A shape, tall, still, facing me. Voice lower, I couldn't make out a face. I couldn't even tell if it had one. But it didn't move, not even when I took a step backward. Frozen, like a figure carved out of the night. Then the lamppost went out. Darkness swallowed everything. When the light blinked back on, the shape was closer. Half the distance between us gone. I didn't run. My legs wouldn't respond. Fear pinned them in place. I blinked and the lamp went out again. When it came back, the shape stood only 20 feet away. Close enough for me to hear it breathe. Slow, heavy, as though each breath was an effort. Very quiet. Close enough for me to see that the snow around it wasn't untouched. It was disturbed, dragged outward, like something had been pulled toward it. The light flickered again, and for a split second, I saw its outline clearly. Not human, not animal. Something bent in ways bodies shouldn't bend. Limbs too long, torso too still, head tilted as though listening. And then, deep breath. It spoke, not out loud, not with lips or a tongue, but straight into my mind. Whispering, drawn out, "You heard me." My chest tightened so sharply I nearly doubled over. The pressure behind my ribs felt like a fist closing around my lungs. I stumbled backward, falling into the snow. Cold shot up my spine. The thing, took one slow, deliberate step toward me. The snow didn't crunch under its weight. It didn't make any sound at all. I scrambled to my feet and ran, blindly, stupidly, until the houses blurred into streaks of dark and white. I didn't stop until I reached the woods on the edge of town. Even then, I kept glancing back, expecting to see the figure under another flickering lamp. But it didn't follow, not into the trees. The forest swallowed me, branches clawing at my coat, roofs trying to trip my steps. And somewhere behind me, back in the silent streets, the voice whispered again, quiet, closer than before. You heard me, and now I can hear you. The woods swallowed every sound except my breath. Harsh, uneven, visible in the cold like pale smoke. The deeper I ran, the more the town disappeared behind me. Its frozen streets, its silent windows, that impossible figure under the lamp. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Eventually, my legs gave out. I collapsed against a fallen tree, snow dampening my sleeves, the cold soaking through to my skin. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening, waiting. But the forest stayed still. The branches above didn't sway. No wind, no movement. Every tree stood frozen like statues, holding their breath with me. And that silence frightened me more than the voice ever had. I forced myself to stand. My limbs screamed in protest, but I pushed on, knowing I had to keep moving. Anywhere was better than the town now. But as I walked deeper into the woods, I realized something. A detail so small, so quiet it didn't reach my mind until it was too late. There were no footprints behind me. Not mine, not anything's. The snow should have held my tracks. It should have shown every desperate step I'd taken. But it was untouched. Smooth, perfect, like I hadn't walked there at all. Paused 2 seconds. My breath hitched. A hollow feeling opened in my gut. I turned slowly, eyes tracing the spotless white behind me. And that's when I saw him. A man, or something shaped like a man, standing between the trees. Tall, still, face hidden in shadow. At first I thought it was the same figure from the lamp, but it wasn't. This one was familiar. Narrowed voice. I stepped closer, my boots sinking silently into the snow, then closer still, and the shape resolved. Just enough for me to see the edges of a coat, a collar, broad shoulders. Recognition hit me like a strike to the chest. It was the sheriff, or what was left of him. His body hung unnaturally straight, as if something invisible held him upright. His head tilted at an impossible angle, eyes wide open, glistening in the moonlight, but empty, completely empty. And then his jaw moved. Slow, unnatural whisper. You ran. The voice wasn't his, not remotely. It scraped through the air, warped and broken, like it was being forced through a rotten speaker. I staggered back, my heel catching on a root. His head twitched violently, a sharp snapping motion, and his neck bent further, far beyond human limits, whispering, You heard me. The forest around us shivered, as though something enormous passed through the trees. The sheriff's body jerked forward, one limb at a time, not walking, not stepping, but dragged by something behind him. Snow trailed upward around his feet, as if pulled by unseen strings. I turned and ran, blindly, branches clawing at my face, my lungs burning. The whisper followed me, everywhere, from every direction at once, echoing layered. You heard me, and now I hear everything. I broke through a thicket and stumbled into a clearing. A perfect circle of untouched snow. No trees, no tracks, nothing, except a sound. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingertips brushing the ice beneath the earth. I froze, not out of fear, but because the ground beneath me moved. Just slightly, a tremor, a breath, and then, hushed, I heard my name, not whispered, not called, but spoken, with perfect clarity, from directly below my feet. I stepped back, but the ground cracked, a thin line splitting the snow, like a wound opening. Light seeped through it, a dull, pulsing glow, slow, measured, like a heartbeat. The forest fell silent. Even the wind refused to move. Very quiet, and something inside the earth knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock. My breath turned to ice in my throat. The ground beneath me vibrated again. The glow brightening. Voices rose around me. Dozens, hundreds, layered whispers climbing out of the soil, all speaking the same phrase. Dozens whispering together. We hear you. The light flared. The earth jolted upward, and something beneath the snow began to push its way out. A hand, or something shaped like one, pressed against the cracking surface. I stumbled back, tripping into the trees. The light spread, bleeding across the clearing. And then, as the ground split wide, I finally saw what was beneath it, sharp inhale. But you'll hear that part later. Low, final whisper, because it's closer now. Much closer. Closer than the voice. Closer than the sheriff. Closer than the thing under the church. Pause 2 seconds. It followed me out of the woods. And it's still following. Right now.